Hey guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube. This is part 2 of my 1,000 subscriber Q&A. We have a lot of ground to cover, so I'm just going to get right into the questions. First question, the content you put out is fantastic, thank you. And I'd love to see more videos on collectible card markets, sports, Pokemon, Magic. They are coming. What are your thoughts on limited sports card inserts, Skybox, PMGs, etc.? Well, again, this goes back to mass-produced scarcity versus organic collectability. Most of this stuff is not good long-term investments, in my opinion. If you want to get into this game, you want to engage in short-term speculation and feed the Timmies and Poindexters out there that don't know any better, or some of the people who do have a passion for this and don't care about the financial value, then by all means, you can make a little bit of money selling to them if you know what you're doing and you analyze the market. But overall, for long-term price appreciation, I would not consider items like this valid investments. It's just like the commentary I have done on Nintendo Amiibos, Funko Pops, Lego sets of the modern era, and also, of course, limited run games, strictly limited games, and items of that nature. Those items were not meant to have long-term collectability in mind. If you don't believe me, I can do follow-up after follow-up video where we go back 10, 20, 30, 40 years and we look at the collectibles marketplace, and there were all these companies like Hummel or Franklin Mint or Precious Moments making these items, promoting them through mass-produced scarcity. People bought into the collecting markets, and today pretty much they're worthless on the secondary market. Nobody cared. I've said this before. Most of these companies make great products. I don't dispute that. I buy limited run games. I buy Amiibo. I do not buy Funko Pops. Sorry, it's not for me. I buy Lego. But I am not sitting here holding those items thinking in 20, 30 years when I'm 70, I'm going to be able to sell these items for a large profit. It's just not going to happen, guys. It's not going to materialize the way that a lot of you out there think. And I don't mean that as an insult to anybody, because if we go back to the 80s and 90s, I got caught up in some speculative bubbles. That's how I got this knowledge. So I'm not presenting my knowledge in a way where, well, I know better than you. I'm presenting my knowledge through a way that teaches experience through this channel. And I was lucky. I had a lot of well-to-do people in the antiques trade that taught me the basics before I sunk significant amounts of cash in some of these speculative markets that today, if I did that, I would have probably never recovered. Because I know a lot of people out there that had just as much as a head start as me in the antiques and collectibles trade, and they ruined it on themselves by speculating on all this crap, whether it was 1990s comic books or 80s baseball cards or whatever collecting category was so-called hot at present time. They were putting a lot of money into it, and when they tried to grow their business, they didn't have any cash flow or capital to work with because it was all being put into items that pretty much never materialized with any real financial gains. So be very careful if you go down that path. Word to the wise. Next question. Congrats on 1,000 subscribers. Thank you. My question is, do you think any 2019 or 2020 coins that are easy to find now will be hard or valuable to find later? Well, the one segment of the coin collecting marketplace that I don't touch, but it is fascinating, is the market for error coins. So in my opinion, I don't think any coins being produced today are going to have organic collectability, in my opinion, unless it is a variant or a mistake or an error that was produced and was allowed to slip through the U.S. Mint. That would be the only way in that particular scenario. Now, do I think there's an exception to every rule? I do. But if you want to collect coins, and again, I'm talking from the United States perspective because I am an American who lives in America, I would advise you to go after coins that were produced from the 1700s all the way up through the 1950s. My advice is also to stop at the 1950s because when you hit 1960s, a lot of that stuff was hoarded en masse. And also when you hit 1965, the coinage in the United States changed drastically. Silver was no longer being produced in our coins from 1965 and later. Copper was produced in our coins up until 1981. So if you have a quote-unquote copper penny that was made before 1981, chances are it is pure copper, with some exceptions. But overall, those coins did have copper in them. But today, the coins that the United States government produce are clad alloy coinage. they are not considered to be collectible items as a result, because most of the early collectors of coins, believe it or not, were precious metal investors. The coin collectors actually came later, and they said, hey, there's a unique history to this stuff. We can learn the financial history of the Roman Empire, or the Greek Empire, or the United States, just by looking at the coins that this country produced. And they became valuable collectible pieces as a result. But I would not be putting any money into a lot of the newer commemorative coins. Anything made by the U.S. Mint, some of those items will have long-term appeal and collectability, but overall, 90% of that stuff is pretty much speculative. It comes out into the marketplace, they usually limit supply, speculators go after it and they flip it on the secondary market, they take their profit, and what do you think they're spending their money on that they made from those items? They're going back and they're buying coins that were minted in the 1700s, 1800s, and early 1900s. So if you want to learn coins, you really have to learn the history of coins, understand the sophisticated market that exists today for collectible coins, and that's how you profit from that market over the long term, not the short term. Coin collecting is a long-term venture. There's a lot of people out there that sell too early, and they lose a fortune in the process because they lose faith in the market. Coin collecting moves in bear and bull cycles, and ironically, it's usually counter to what the economy's doing. So if the economy right now, like it is creating record number of jobs, record gains in the stock market, the coin collecting market overall is going to be in a bear market. The exception to the rule is rare coins, coins of which there's only a couple of known examples, or there's a handful of examples that are selling for $100,000, $500,000, $5 million. Those coins are the exception to the rule. So if you want to learn the coin collecting marketplace, there's an excellent book you can read. It is called The Coin Collector's Survival Manual. It is the revised 7th edition by Scott A. Travers. Get this book and you will learn how to collect coins and analyze markets. And it's very important to do that in the coin collecting marketplace because it's very sophisticated. Next question. And this question centers around Atari. This is a great question. I am going to answer it in full because it's a very important question. Congrats on 1,000 subscribers. You should have more. Thank you. I am curious about your thoughts on the rare Atari 2600 games since the market has already had its boom and decline. Do you think picking up some of the rarer games would be a decent investment long term? Atari is a curiosity. It is no longer really a collectible. There's very few collectors of Atari out there anymore, just like there's very few collectors of Vectrex, Intellivision, ColecoVision. And I'm going to say something controversial right now. For those of you guys out there that think TurboGrafx collecting, or Sega Saturn collecting, or Neo Geo collecting, or Sega Master System collecting, or 3DO collecting, or Atari Jaguar, Atari Lynx collecting, or PS Vita collecting is going to be the way to go, you have to understand those markets are going to end up almost the same way as Atari, Intellivision, and ColecoVision. These particular products apply and are coveted by the generation that grew up with these items, meaning myself. I grew up and got an Atari at the age of 5. I played it till my fingers bled and loved it. Today, I am not collecting Atari games. I made a lot of money in the Atari speculative bubble that lasted from 1994, 1995, all the way up to the year 2005. Then prices started to tank and Nintendo started to become king. Well, ironically, I get asked this question a lot. People want to know, is Atari going to come back? Or I keep hearing people talk about Atari's going to come back. Intellivision's going to be popular again. ColecoVision's going to be popular again. It's not going to happen, guys. Collectible markets are linear. Antique markets are cyclical. Atari had its day in the sun. Intellivision had its day in the sun. ColecoVision had its day in the sun. The top 1 to 3% of the market for rare Atari games is actually starting to weaken. I have been contacted by several well-known collectors in this realm who have all told me, they said, you know what, I probably shouldn't have put this much money in these games. And the answer is you are correct, because overall, the Atari market suffered a 40 to 70% decline over the last 10 to 15 years. That is not a good investment. Unless you have a passion for those items, stay out of that market. The one exception to this rule, and there is one valid exception that we got to talk about really quick, and I'm going to do a video on this too, guys. If WADA game grading starts to catch on with Atari collectors, I can see certain factory sealed Atari games selling for a significant premium. This will not apply to complete in box games overall and or cartridge only games, because those items don't have the same investment appeal as factory sealed games. But this is a very slim market, it's a very thin market, and I would not expect that to happen. So be very careful if you're thinking about getting into Atari games. Usually when a market hits those type of price declines, it's pretty much dead. And I don't mean any offense to my Atari collectors out there, but honestly, how many people are getting into Atari or Intellivision or ColecoVision collecting in the year 2020? It's just not happening. You want to play some Atari games? There's the Atari flashback systems. You can get a console and cartridge-only games very cheap if you want to have them to play. You can also play the games through other means. But please, do not invest long-term in pre-Nintendo video game systems. It's a bad investment overall, and it's pretty much dead. I don't even advise people to invest in Commodore games, Apple games, or IBM games, which is probably going to be another question on this list that we will eventually get to. But please be very, very careful in this particular market. Next question. I would be interested to hear more on 80s toys. Well, yes, I will be doing more videos on 80s toys. I will be doing a video on Toy Hunter. I know if you guys watch my content from beginning to end, I did state when I was talking about reality television that I would do more videos on Toy Hunter and the like and give my commentary on that. The video got stuck in development hell, so I've still been working through it. However, I just want to make sure that when I do that video, it conveys the talking points that I want to put out in camera, because I don't want to produce a less quality video than what I've been used to producing these last couple of weeks, these last couple of months. But rest assured, we will be talking more about vintage toys and Toy Hunter as a whole and its effect on the secondary vintage toy marketplace, because most people don't realize this. Prior to 2015, between 2010 and 2015, there was a speculative bubble that appeared in vintage toys. And if you bought during that time, depending on what you were buying, you could have took pretty much a loss if you sold after the year 2015, because the market pretty much subsidized after Star Wars The Force Awakens came out and was pretty much seen as a good movie, don't get me wrong, but it didn't really set the world on fire, as we all know. Disney has a known tendency to over-capitalize a lot of their franchises. And ironically, they ignore a lot of other franchises. For instance, I'm a huge Phineas and Ferb Gravity Falls fan. And I was really ashamed at Disney because they really didn't put much merchandise or even promote those series as best as they could have, compared to how they promoted a lot of the Marvel movies, Star Wars, and even other Disney Channel original exclusives. So next question. Can you talk about ideal storage conditions, temperature, humidity, and if you have a preference when buying a safe vault to store your collectibles that you would recommend? This is all going to be covered in an upcoming video. There's a lot of risks with how you store these collectibles. You have to understand that if you're going to store like coins, currency, that should be done through a safety deposit box at a bank, but you have to be careful with humidity and temperature. So if you're going to store anything in a safety deposit box, you want to use silica gel or something like that to absorb the moisture. You also want to use a hydrometer that will periodically measure the amount of humidity and also the average temperature of that safe deposit box. I will cover all that in a other video that's going to be devoted to long-term storage and also choosing the best storage option for antiques and collectibles. That video is also, I'll be honest, stuck a little bit in development hell, just because I have to pull out the points that I want to convey, and I don't want to make a 2-hour-long video when I could probably convey a lot of those details in 10 or 15 minutes. So that's why that video has been on hold. It's been in production for about a month now, and every time I circle back to it, I keep making the video longer than it needs to be. So that will premiere, though, probably within the next month or two. Second question. With graded sealed vintage games, Nintendo and Super Nintendo particularly, of course, you rightly point out that we don't know how many graded games are out there. Yet when I look at population reports, they have so far all been under 100 graded games. Assuming this number would double or triple, would be 200 to 300 in population. those numbers are dwarfed by the population of several Gold and Silver Age comics, yet some of them still sell for thousands and thousands of dollars. I already know where you're going with this question, which leads me to believe that the sealed graded vintage game market still has legs for price appreciation. Well, given the fact that we now have auction companies, grading companies, and a lot of high-profile speculators out there manipulating this market, you're damn right it has legs. I'm not telling you that vintage video games or graded video games are going to go away anytime soon. What I'm saying is little Timmy out there who takes $5,000 on a credit card and goes after a factory-sealed graded game, what happens if that game drops to $2,000 or $3,000? Is little Timmy going to be okay with that? Chances are no. It's a very speculative market. For instance, guys, I collect coins, as a lot of you guys know. I can log on to any major auction that Heritage has when it deals with coins or Stacks and Bowers. I can look at a coin, and in my mind, I can put a price estimate as to what the low end of that coin is and the high end. So if I'm bidding on that coin and I want to come in right at the middle, I can do that. That's having discipline. That's also having knowledge in that market. I'm sorry, for those of you collecting graded video games out there, you cannot do that. And I'm going to tell you right now why. There is no price history for these items that has gone into the decades or even the centuries. When you get into collecting markets like antique furniture, antique glass, coins, currency, art, these markets have a lot of validity to them. There's a long track record of price appreciation, price decreases, price gains that you can chart. You cannot do this with graded games. Second fallacy of this argument is you are comparing graded video games to the graded comic book marketplace at present time. Comic books are in a different collecting category than video games. There's a lot of people out there that will buy a graded comic book, but they will not buy a graded video game. When you grade a video game, you actually create an item that is a commodity. You can't play that video game. If you want an example of this, Pat the NES Punk said something perfect in one of his videos that I'm going to repeat right here. Pat the NES Punk said, if you want to play The Legend of Zelda, you can download the game on a modern console. You can go out and you can find a used Nintendo cartridge for a couple of bucks or $30, whatever they go for. You can buy a complete in-box copy of The Legend of Zelda. You can also buy a graded complete in-box copy of The Legend of Zelda. Or you can get a factory-sealed copy of The Legend of Zelda. Now, if you want to get a comic book and you want to go after an Action Comics comic book and you want an original, guess what? You only can buy it in one form. It doesn't matter how many other times it was reprinted. To get an original Action Comics 1 from the 1938 or 39, whenever it was released, you have to pretty much go after that one item. The graded comic book market is not comparable to the graded video game market. Be very careful in your assumptions here. There is a crossover effect of collectors that are involved in the graded comic book market at present time who are selling off their collections to go after these graded video games. But that market is extremely speculative. As much as I despise the amount of speculation in the graded comic book market, as much as I believe prices are going to fall over the next 10, 20 years, there is 10 times the amount of speculation in the graded video game marketplace at present time. Be very careful in that market. Yes, prices are going to rise. I'm going to tell you that right now. You're going to have people, if this channel ever blows up, if I get 10, 20,000 subscribers, look at that guy, Sean, Reserved Investments. I paid $5,000 for this graded game and it's worth $15,000. Well, Poindexter, which you refuse to point out, is the game that you paid $6,000 for that's now worth $2,000. Or the one that you paid $10,000 for that's now selling for $4,000. And if you average it all up, I guarantee you the average person is not going to make as many gains as they think. The people that are getting rich off of graded video games are the ones that bought at the right time, had them graded, and are now selling into the market. Or, I hate to say it, Wada Games and the auction companies who manipulated this market perfectly to the point it is what it is. And that's no offense to them. They can do that. It's perfectly legal. There's books on it. You can learn how to manipulate any market. I have nothing against Heritage Auctions, nothing against Certified Link, nothing against Wada Games. I do business with all of them. They're great. But you have to look at the fundamentals and how we got here. And this is something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. So that's my only caution with that. Be very careful when you start looking at population reports and equating, well, what if there's only 300 copies? I can tell you, your estimates are very low. There's not just 300 copies of factory seal video games out there. Back in 1995, I remember JCPenney Outlet was clearing out pallets of factory sealed Konami games. Castlevania, Castlevania 2, Castlevania 3, Contra, Super C, Contra Force. I know collectors that have this stuff in their collections. And some of these guys are sitting on 5 factory sealed copies of the same Nintendo game. Be very careful if you're trying to sit here and fathom how many of these games are out there and stating, well, there's only 200 to 300 of each. That's complete hogwash. Be careful with that, guys. Next question. I see on eBay that one can get a common date MS62 Double Eagle St. Gaudian's coin for not much more than an ounce of gold. Is this not a great buy as a long-term investment? Yes, you are thinking correctly. If you want to invest in gold and you want to do it through physical bullion, and again, I can give my thoughts on investing in gold in a subsequent video. I personally am not a gold bug. No offense to the people who are. No offense to that term. I like silver better than gold, but I do not invest in precious metals. I invest in rare or scarce coins. However, I know a lot of people that'll look at the cost of a third-party graded MS62, MS63, MS61 St. Gaudian's gold coin. For those of you unaware, a St. Gaudian's gold coin was minted by the U.S. in the 1907 to 1933, if I have my facts correct, and it is a 1-ounce gold coin. Well, some of the common dates of that particular series sell for roughly the same cost as an ounce of gold. So if you're going to invest in gold coins, a lot of people like to go after classic or antique gold coins because they get a double-edged investment. They're not only investing in gold, they're also investing in the collectible coin marketplace as well. So this person brings up a great point. If you know what you're doing, you understand the coin marketplace, and you also want to invest in gold, it is a great way to invest. I actually like this strategy better than the people going out buying 1/10 of an American Eagle gold coin or a 1/4 ounce American Eagle gold coin, because fractional gold investing, in my opinion, is stupid. So is fractional silver investing. If you want to invest in gold and silver, do it by the ounce. Don't do it in 1/10 ounce or a 1/4 of an ounce or 1/2 an ounce. It makes no sense to me, because you pay a higher price on the secondary market and you're getting less gold in regards to what you're paying, simply because of the fact that the spot price of gold, there's a markup towards that gold price. So those of you that are going out there and buying 1/10 American Eagle gold coins, you're paying a lot more for those coins than somebody who is going after 1-ounce gold coins. So in this sense, yes, it makes perfect sense to me. So I do like that particular idea. Next question. I would like to hear your views on investment grade whiskey, and is it a better option for gold? Well, here's the thing with whiskey. Whiskey, much like wine, is a sophisticated collecting market in the greater antiques and collectibles trade. I do not encourage anybody to invest in those markets without consulting either an expert or being an expert in those markets themselves. I can do a whole video on whiskey if you guys want me to, and wine. I will say this. Those particular markets tend to trend with more wealthy people because they have the money to spend in those markets. They also know how to buy, they also know how to sell, and they already usually have a working relationship with a lot of the auction companies that cater to those markets. So if you are getting into whiskey, if you are getting into wine, be very careful. You are asking me if it is a better option than gold for long-term growth. In my opinion, gold is an alternate investment and commodity that can easily be liquidated. Anything in the antiques and collectibles trade, there is a realm or a certain degree of illiquidity in those particular items, unless if we're talking, of course, gold coins, silver coins, and the like. You have to be very careful when you compare a truly liquid item with that of an illiquid asset. So for instance, during the Lego boom, there were a lot of people comparing Lego sets to gold. I always laughed at that scenario because Lego sets are not as liquid as gold. If you want to convert gold to cash, you can do so 24 hours of any day, anywhere in the world, of which an industrialized population exists. It's very easy to sell gold on the secondary market. You cannot do that with most collectibles. I hate to say that. To maximize value, you have to find a buyer, or you have to go through a legit source, whether it be an auction house where you're consigning them, or a marketplace that recognizes that value. Remember, this goes back to my idea of undervalued collectibles. There are no undervalued collectibles. People just choose the wrong marketplace. Well, antiques and collectibles are illiquid by nature overall. Again, if you go back to the previous person's question about the MS62 St. Gaudien's gold coin, that would actually fall more in line with the ounce of gold scenario than being an actual collectible. So in this case, be very careful when somebody would ask, like, what's a better investment, comic books or gold? Well, what's your horizon, and how are we defining investment? Because both are actually alternate asset investments, in my opinion. You can also consider gold an alternate currency. I don't recommend calling gold an alternate currency, because then people get this idea in their head that the dollar is worthless because it's a fiat currency, and we can sit here all day and argue back and forth on that particular topic. So I'm going to end this video here. I hope that this video has been enjoyable for you. Again, if I didn't get to your question in this video and it wasn't answered in the first part, it'll be answered in the next part. That's going to be coming over the next few days, part 3. So if you have any feedback for me, any questions, just let me know and we'll go from there. Thank you.